What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Connor Speed6. Today we are in Forza Horizon 5. See you later. We're going to be talking a little bit about some wheel settings for the Logitech G920 in Forza Horizon 5. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go through my settings and let you guys sort of know my baseline and what I feel is best for me personally. What may be best for you, of course, may be slightly off from my recommendations and my recommended settings. But what I can tell you is that my settings I do feel are very, very good, and it actually feels fairly easy to drive in the game throughout the game, whether it's on tarmac or dirt, cross country, etc. I do have these dialed in pretty well, so I definitely recommend checking them out. Now, before we get into the deep dive, please be sure to leave the video a like, leave me a positive comment down below, and if you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe for more weekly content like this. It helps me out so much, and I really do appreciate all the support. Now, let's get right into these settings. For me personally, I like to actually feel sort of like a real-life car does when driving down the road. So I like to have a bit of resistance, I guess, when turning the wheel itself. So I like a little bit of a heavier feeling, not as heavy as some people. Some people like the wheel, in my opinion, just way too stiff. I don't want to feel like I've wrestled a bear after I've done a race. I do also have a 6-speed or 6-gear H pattern shifter over onto my right that you can't really see right now. Now, jumping into the settings here, if you're not really sure where to look to find the settings for your wheels, it can be found down here in the advanced controls, and all of your different settings will be right here. Now, I do have vibration on, but I have it set very, very low, which you'll see here in just a minute, because the Logitech G920 is honestly very, very loud. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind when doing these sorts of things. I do personally, because I'm recording and I have a microphone right next to the steering wheel, so that could pose a bit of a problem. Okay, so we'll begin looking at the settings themselves with the steering axis, dead zone, inside and outside. Now, the inside I have set at 3 because steering in Forza Horizon 5 on the wheel can be a little bit sensitive. So teeny tiny little movements on the steering wheel where the center of your wheel may only go a degree or two could actually make the car move an awful lot. So what this does is this actually deadens that little bit, so the wheels don't turn until a little bit later than normal or from center. So we'll just say from 0 to 100 degrees, we'll call it. When you move the steering wheel, we'll say 3 degrees from center this way or this way. There really is no movement in the steering itself on the game. It gives you a little bit of leeway, but it still is sensitive enough to where those little movements might register just a little bit. That way you can, sort of feel what you're doing, but not be too twitchy. I found at 0, I kind of just keep weaving and the car really never stays straight all the time, and I find it difficult to keep the car just going in a straightforward motion. Now, the steering axis dead zone outside I have set all the way to the far right at 100 because this adjusts the overall sensitivity of the steering itself. If you want to have your steering just a little bit more sensitive, you can always lower it down a little bit. But again, in Forza Horizon especially, it's very, very difficult to steer and counter steer, especially if you catch yourself in a slide a lot of times. You have to be very, very fast with the wheel and with your arms and hand movements and things like that. So this makes it just a little bit less sensitive than it would be if you lowered this down a little bit. So basically, the higher the number to the right, the less sensitive or the less the steering input itself, meaning the game will recognize that input a little bit less. Now, you may be able to adjust this down a little bit to your liking if you want it to be a little bit more sensitive, but I'm telling you, the lower you go, the more sensitive and more twitchy the game can actually become. Now, the steering linearity, I prefer to keep it directly at 50. If you lower this further to the left or raise it further to the right, that can actually negatively affect the accuracy of your steering when you're inputting the steering motion into the game. When you're at 50, it's pretty much going to be the same throughout the steering lock. So that means when you make the smaller movements in, like the higher speed, flowing corners like that, wherever you are on the steering itself in real life, the car is going to be pointed that same place in the game. So there's not going to be a big issue or big lag or any type of issue whenever you're steering in real life compared to the game. It will be quite literally the exact same movement you have in real life transferred into the game. Now the acceleration axis dead zone on the inside. Now this is all just personal preference. Basically, the lower this first number, the inside dead zone, the lower that number, the less sensitive your throttle is going to be when you're barely pushing it. So if you have a car that's prone to oversteering or spinning out a little bit like that, as you know, on corner exit, you have to be very gentle on the throttle. This will give you a little bit of leeway if you like to have your foot sort of resting on the accelerator, so it's not just forever accelerating when you don't want it to. Me personally, I prefer to just have this at 0. That way I don't have any issues. When I want it to go, it goes. It's simple as that. Now the acceleration axis dead zone outside, again, this is basically just sensitivity on your throttle itself. Now I prefer to have my dead zone outside to 100 because I don't want to have to worry about not pressing my throttle down all the way. This basically just gives you the full range from the inside to the outside of throttle, from not being pressed to full pressed to the floor, I guess you could say, or smashing the throttle. It's not going to really make any difference throughout the range of the pedal. However, if you do lower that number a little bit, there comes a point where the fact that you're pushing it all the way to the floor doesn't really matter. You've already reached the full press, per se. So if you set it to 50, you only need to press your throttle down 50% of the way for you to reach the full acceleration per the trigger itself, which is the throttle. Okay, now these two are extremely important, especially for the Logitech G920, the inside and outside deceleration. I have these set from 0 to 100, reason being, you do not want to give this brake pedal on the Logitech G920 any type of dead zone at all, because the more dead zone you have, the further down you have to press the brake pedal, and that gives you way more likelihood to lock up the brakes if you don't use ABS. If you use ABS, it doesn't necessarily matter per se, but if you're a person who does not like to use ABS like myself, if you smash the brake pedal down, you're gonna lock up, slide through corners, understeer everywhere. So what you want to have the full range of the brake pedal here, from not compressed all the way to depressed. That's why I don't have any dead zone on the inside or the outside. Because if I lower the outside dead zone a little bit, or any amount, that means it'll lock up the brakes earlier than if I had the brake pressed all the way to the floor and the dead zone on the outside to 100. You want the brakes to register immediately as soon as you start pressing on the brake pedal, because again, you don't want to have that little bit of leeway or that window of dead zone, because you're gonna have to keep pressing before it actually engages, and that makes your engagement window a little bit tighter. So again, giving you more likelihood to lock up. So this is my personal recommendation, especially for the Logitech G920. Now, the same goes for the clutch dead zone inside and outside. I like to keep these 0 and 100 again, because I want that full range of clutch. I smash the clutch down. So when I'm shifting, I'm banging the gears, I'm smashing the clutch, throwing it. So I don't want any type of issue. I want the full range of the clutch, just like I would in a real car. The engagement is probably right around 50 to 75%. So when it actually engages the clutch itself, it's about halfway. But I throw this sucker and I smash the clutch. For me, that's just the best way to do it, especially if you are left foot braking as well, which if you're doing, manual with clutch, you probably aren't going to be left foot braking. But still, I like to just smash my clutch. So this is a personal preference. If you'd like to have a little bit less movement or less engagement on the clutch itself, you could lower the dead zone outside way down if you'd like to about 75, 60, and then you don't have to actually push it all the way. You can, sort of just tap it or half press it, and that'll disengage or engage the clutch as well. The e-brake, 0 in my opinion, and 100 again. I want it to be immediate. So if I hit the B button, which is where I have the e-brake mapped, I want that to engage immediately. I don't want there to be any brake, any gap, nothing. I want to hit the button, I want to hit the e-brake and just slide the car a little bit. There's no reason, in my opinion, to adjust these at all. Now, vibration scale, I have this turned almost all the way off because again, this is a very, very loud and chattery wheel. The Logitech G920 is one of the loudest wheels I think I've ever seen or heard. Even if you're driving at 0.1 like I am now, when you go off-road or across country, it still chatters really, really loud at a decent amount. So I would recommend lowering it to 0.1 or even honestly 0. because your force feedback and things, which we'll look at here in a second, that will still make the wheel feel heavy and give you the force feedback and the, you know, aggressive feel that we're used to. The vibration, however, ends up being just an annoyance with this wheel. Force feedback scale, I have mine set just a little bit higher than 0. I didn't want to raise it too high because then that would really be ripping the wheel back to center. I don't want that per se, but I do want to have a little bit of feel. So 1 is, for me, a perfect feeling for this game. Now the center spring scale, I've tested all the way, you know, up and then all the way down. And for me, this dead center at 1 is pretty darn good, because if you go a little bit too far left, the wheel feels a little bit too loose. So it ends up doing a lot of this back and forth, and it's kind of annoying. But a little bit too much further to the right, which I'd be comfortable from 1 to 1.3, but too much further to the right, it makes it just a little bit too aggressive in my opinion, whenever the wheel is trying to center itself. Now, if you're drifting or something like that, you may want to raise this up a little bit. That way the wheel will really spin itself back to lock, and then you can catch it, of course, if you need to center the vehicle or counter the vehicle. But for just racing and cruising around, for me, the center spring scale at 1 has been pretty perfect. Now the wheel damper scale is what I was talking about earlier on the heavy feeling. I have mine set to 1.4, which is a little bit heavier than just the regular down the middle of 1. It again makes the steering wheel feel a little bit heavier and a little more realistic to a real car. The same feel, of course. You could go a little bit higher. Like I said, a lot of people prefer a really heavy wheel, but this is kind of right in the middle where I like the feel. 1 is a little bit too light, and anything less than that is just no way. You're gonna have tons of wheel oscillation, and it's not going to feel like a real car. The whole point of doing this is to make it feel like you're driving a real car. So you want to have a little bit of resistance when you're turning. Otherwise, you might as well just play on a controller, honestly. So the mechanical trail scale. Now, the reason I have this bumped up a little bit is because in Forza Horizon, honestly, a lot of the cars are understeering big time. That actually puts a ton of feedback back into the steering wheel if you have it lower than 1. You could probably get away with 1, maybe 0.9 to 1.3, and that would feel pretty good, 1.2. But for me, I wanted to soften that up a little bit, because when you're turning and the car's understeering, if you have this set too low, it will seriously want to pull really hard back to center. So for me, I just didn't like the way that felt, because I already have the wheel damper scale or the resistance set up a little bit higher than normal. For me, the 1.4 on the mechanical trail was good enough, because that provided a lot of force feedback, or ample force feedback, while understeering or turning while I'm in the middle of a corner. Now, the force feedback minimum force, this again has something to do with when you're turning, the tire load basically through the car to the steering wheel itself. So I raised mine a little bit because, again, a lower number here provides a heavier feeling, or a more resistance through the steering wheel while your car is turning. Basically, when you're turning, there's a lateral load on the car where the car wants to balance or rotate or roll to the outside of the corner over your outside wheels. This will make the steering wheel feel like it wants to turn the opposite way when you're in a corner, when in all actuality, you need to continue turning into the corner. I found that this actually caused me to feel like the car was understeering a lot more if I had it set under 1. So I do have mine set to 1.2. It lightens up that lateral load a little bit. Again, working hand in hand with the wheel damper scale and the mechanical trail scale. Since I have the wheel damper set up higher a little bit to more stiff and more resistance, I wanted to make sure these were turned down just a little bit. Turned it down, but bumped up. Remember, on these two here, the lower number means higher resistance. Now, force feedback load sensitivity. This one was a little bit difficult and took some toying with. This basically affects the wheel. Whenever your tires are sort of bouncing off of little teeny tiny bumps, if you go over curbs in the cities, this will actually affect the steering wheel itself, because when you hit these bumps, your steering wheel naturally wants to go whatever direction, you know, you're turning, or whatever if you're turning left and you hit a bump, that automatically wants to make your wheels turn the opposite direction. So the lower this number, the less overall torque the wheel has on you whenever you're going over those little teeny tiny bumps in the road that you may come across, like curbs, rocks, especially in this game, or just, you know, kind of the little whoopties and rough patches going down the volcano, we'll say. If you want to have a little bit more of a struggle and a little bit more fighting of the wheel, you can raise this up a little bit, but I don't personally recommend it. It feels really good the way I have it here at 0.8. Now the road feel scale, this really affects the overall sensitivity of the car and the feel of the road underneath the car coming through the steering wheel. So again, this has to do with asphalt surfaces, how the little bumps and the little elevation changes in the road itself affects, again, the centering force of the steering wheel. I again prefer this a little bit lower because I have the steering wheel stiff in different parts of the settings. So I don't want to have that too high because then it would just be too much force on the steering wheel itself. Now the off-road feel scale, this is a really tough one. I love off-road racing and rally racing, I really do, but I do not, and you do not, I would assume, want this to be too high, because let me tell you, some of the surfaces in this game are extremely bumpy and extremely rough. That means if you have this too high, your self-aligning torque will want to throw your steering wheel really hard and will actually provide a lot of resistance and stress up on your upper shoulders and arms, and you'll be just winded and tired by the end of some of these events and races. Honestly, even just cruising around and drifting around some of these dirt roads and things like that with the off-road feel scale way up, it's taxing. So I personally recommend having it down a little bit. That way, again, it's not too much work for your upper body, because honestly, this little steering wheel, it's little. I know it's belt driven, so it can actually throw this wheel the opposite direction really, really fast. And it can be really difficult to catch at times. That's why a lot of people don't like driving on the wheel in Forza Horizon 5, is because it seems like it's way too difficult to catch the car once it goes sideways or once you lose the back end of a car. It's really difficult. Sometimes the rotation of the steering wheel is very, very fast and it's nearly impossible to catch. But that's those settings there. Now, the other thing you can adjust, of course, is your controls on the input mapping. What I recommend doing is changing your e-brake to the B button. Everything else from there is just up to you. You can set everything however you would like. Your clutch, your brake, your accelerator, of course, they are what they are. Your shifter, that's your H pattern if you'd like to. Your shift up and shift down would be your paddles at RB, LB. If you're doing just like a manual sequential gearbox. Other than that, on the mapping, it's really just sort of up to you and what you like the best and what works for you. Yeah, but like I said, I really enjoy driving on the wheel in this game. It's not too difficult, honestly. In Forza Horizon 4, I struggled really, really hard. I don't know why. I think it may have been because I just didn't take time to figure it out and find the best settings for me personally. But in Horizon 5, it does feel a little bit better, so I would recommend trying it out for yourself. I really hope this video helps you guys. I know it's really tough, you know, to figure out the best way to do this. I know that whenever I get into a new game and want to use the steering wheel, like for example, Dirt Rally 2.0 the other day, I reset all of my wheel settings because I hopped in and it felt horrible. But first thing I did was I turned to YouTube, got some recommendations, saw what other people were doing, and basically just adjusted mine to where I liked it, and it felt great. So hopefully this will do the same thing for you guys. Again, these are all just recommendations and my personal preferences. Take this as a baseline for yours, and you know, let me know any feedback down below. Let me know, you know, how it worked for you guys, if it did at all. But yeah, again, please, if you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe for more weekly content like this. Please leave the video a like, and be sure to drop a positive comment down below for me. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. That's gonna do it for me today, y'all. Until next time, I have been Connor Speed 6. Much love, everyone. See you soon.